Stanford University.
Okay, if we're ready to get started, got a lot of stuff to cover. My name is Fred Patton. I'm the editor-in-chief of the Palm Developer Portal. Hopefully by now you visit it. It's developer.palm.com. And today we're going to talk about UI components and services. Before we start, I want to get a feel for where you guys are in the app development process. Does anybody have a working app yet? Anybody brought up the Aries or Eclipse? You've brought up Aries or Eclipse. Okay, that's good. And have you run the basic Hello World application? Have any nods of recognition? Have you gone beyond that at all? Not really. Anybody? Nothing yet to submit to the app catalog? Okay. Well, today we're gonna dig deep into code. We've been doing some kind of high level stuff, and now we're really gonna get into the details of the UI components and the services, which will let you get stuff out to the user and get stuff from the operating system. So what are UI components? Basically, a UI component is a visual, interactive element that the operating system, WebOS, provides for you to give some information or take some information from the user. We provide a wide variety of what we call widgets. That's the basic UI component, and we have some basic designs for these components, but you're allowed to customize them. We'll talk about customizing as we go along here. The implementation is through widget assistance. Have any of you guys looked at the JS files that are included with your with the installation of the SDK? You go down into the SDK and you'll find under shared files there's libraries which show all the code which comes with the phone. So at least all the JavaScript code that comes with the phone. So all the widgets, the widget code is there, the applications are there, and it gives you an idea of how these things work, and you can get a really good idea going through them and of what kind of capabilities are there for you, in addition to reading the documentation, of course. The behavior of each of these widgets is encapsulated in the code and the module widget controller.js, and you can look in there and see what kind of the general behaviors for these widgets are. So why do we want to use common functionality? Why do we want to use these common components? Why wouldn't we just custom make your own buttons, custom make your own lists, whatever? One of the reasons is that it aids user familiarity. A user opens up an application and immediately they know what to do with the things that are on there. Jeremy talked about that in a couple of lectures ago. This is my rule for writing applications, especially small ones. Written documentation is an admission of failure. If you're looking at your application going, well, I'll put that in the user's manual because they'll never understand that, you've blown it. So anytime you can do anything which will help the user understand what your application is going to do without making them go to the manual, you've done a pretty good job. The other thing is that if you have components already designed for you, why waste the time developing them? Anybody who's done a lot of coding will tell you the best way to code something is copy-paste. Copy-paste is awesome. There's also a lot of powerful functionality built in. We're going to talk about the list widget later, which is possibly the most powerful widget that we supply. It's kind of the basis for most of our applications, and it's really great to play with. And all the functionality is built into it. You don't have to worry about the physics of the scroll. If you played with your devices by now, you've seen the scrolling goes up and down and bounces around and has some physics to it. All that stuff's all built in. You don't need to worry about reinventing it. So where do you find these things? And when I say where, I mean mostly in the documentation, but also in the JavaScript code. Most of the widgets live in mojo.widget, mojo.widget.something or other. And we have two exceptions: the file picker and the menu actually live outside of that model. The difference between these is the Mojo widget. Whenever you have a widget, something that's part of Mojo widget, you're going to have to declare it first in your HTML, your scene HTML file. And then there's also going to be some instantiation going on in the JavaScript file in your scene or application or stage assistance. The file picker and the Mojo menu don't require any instantiation at the HTML level. They are all done at the JavaScript level. So let's start with a humble button. You've all done the basic Hello World application. You click on the button and it counts. So you've done this part probably, and you see there's not much to it. You instantiate you have a button div in your HTML file, and all you do is you say it's an XMojo element of button type, and the ID, just give it any old ID, button 1. and then you create an attributes object, a model object, and you in your setup you say this controller setup widget, give it the ID you want to set up, pass it the attributes and the model, and lo, this will come up. You'll get your button widget. And so if you do nothing else, at least you'll get a button. This button is not going to do anything. It's not going to respond to anything. You're not going to be able to push it. You're not going to be able to do anything with it, but you've got your button. So I want to add a label to it. There's a couple ways you can add the label. Programmatically, you can add a label to the model by setting up the button label attribute in the model and just setting it to hello. And then when you do your setup widget, it will say hello. If you've set up a label before and you want to set up a new one, then you'll have to issue a model changed request, and we'll show you that in a little bit. So this is an example of an activity button. Now we start getting into adding some attributes. In this case, we're going to set up our attributes object to say that the type of the button is Mojo Widget Activity Button. And when you press an activity button, it starts this little spinner going. And I'll show you an example of it over here. And we can have, we've also done something else with this button. We've given it a button class of affirmative. And affirmative is a green button. Affirmative is a button that says something's going to happen when you do this. And you will see that there's a negative class also which goes with this. So it's that affirmative class that turns it green. Okay. All this making sense so far? Okay. I'm kind of speeding through this because there's bigger stuff ahead. There's also class negative, as we said, and here it is. We've done basically the same thing. We have a label, negative, and we say, oh, I've also added this little thing here, disabled false. That's optional, but you can't say disabled true if you want to have a button that's kind of grayed out. Now, with negative, you have one button that's obviously go do something, and one that's obviously stop, don't do this. At this point, button text is almost unnecessary. I say almost unnecessary because you do have to have an allowance for users who are colorblind. Red-green colorblindness is something as a user interface designer you have to take into account. But it's pretty obvious that the green is go ahead and send flowers, and the red is go ahead and blow up the planet or something like that. The red means you're going to do something destructive. Okay, you're either going to cancel out of an operation and delete a record that somebody's just worked real hard on, or something along those lines. The green is going to save it and do good stuff. So make sure you use those. Want to use those appropriately. So say we want to change this a little bit. Like we want to change the label. This is what we were talking about before. The model changed. We decided we want to change our button label. So we say this button model, button label. Remember the button model was that object that we had. We set the button label now from hello or press me or something to goodbye. Nothing happens immediately. When you issue this controller, meaning the scene controller we're talking about, that we're working in, model changed, and you pass it the model that you've just updated, it will go through and it will find any widget, any button in this case, that is attached to that model, and it will update it. Now that's an important point, because if you use that same model for multiple buttons, they'll all change. If you use it for only one button, only that one button will change. It's kind of interesting programmatically, and you can do all kinds of interesting stuff with that. So now supposing we want to make the button look a little special. And now I'll show you this, and then we'll switch over to some code, and we'll do some cool stuff with this. Everybody know what CSS is? You've all used it, all coded websites by now, so or you've at least read the documentation, so you know. So we're going to create a class in our CSS called myClass, and it's going to absorb it's going to inherit all the stuff from Palm button, and we're going to change the image, the WebKit border image, to this little blue button thing here. And that's just a little graphic that we created, a little smear. And this is going to be the button up image. This is going to be the button down image. And notice we've said my class Palm button selected. Palm button select is the image that's used when the button is pressed down. I'm going to everybody know about where it says 016, 016 stretch. Anybody have any clue about that? If not, I'm going to show you a real cool tool. Now what we do to declare this button and make it work, in our button div, we say class. We already have our element, ID, which you recognize from before, and we have class, myClass. And now it picks it up. It picks up from the CSS there where it says .myClass. And if we had if we had a pound sign there, pound my class, we would actually be looking at the button ID. And then we put on our, oh, I see, press me and it says customized, but all this then allows you to have a button which, when you press it, is going to look blue, and it's going to stretch. So this is kind of interesting stuff. So let's take a look at border image and what the border image does. I highly recommend that you go to Kevin Decker's In Case of Stairs website. It's a really cool technology blog. Kevin Decker works for us, and he does all kinds of great stuff. And I'm going to show you the website now, where you can kind of see what this stretch business does. Here you see we have a bitmap that we've created. We want to turn this into a border. Well, how are we dividing it up? We're dividing it up using the numbers that you saw. You saw the 0, 16, 0, 16. We're actually dividing up this bitmap, or this image file, using those numbers. And this is kind of shows you how these offsets change things. Right now, it's going to use the top and the right offset to figure out what goes in the corner. And you can see it's that orange, it's that little orange diamond shape. And see, it's stretching it to fit whatever is there. But we can adjust where we want the offset to be. And if you look at the red lines as I move the sliders around, you can see what happens to the border. All that we're doing there is deciding where we're going to pick up, what part of the graphic we're going to pick up for the corners, the tops, the sides. And we're doing exactly the same thing with our image. And they have a nice little example here that looks very much like that smear that we showed you. And under the preview, you can see the box, which shows what it's going to look like as we adjust our numbers back and forth. You see, if we go off to the side, you can see that we're running off the edge. We're running off the edge of our graphic here, and what's happening to the edge of our image here? It's getting squared off, because it's getting squared off, and it's moving up and down here, squeezing. Here we have our button CSS code, and we also have let's get our emulator up here. We'll just check it out live here. This is one of the pieces of sample code that comes with the SDK. It's called UI widgets. We have several pieces of sample code which are designed to show you how services work, how the widgets work. The two main widget samples are called Style Matters, and the other one is this one, UI widgets. The services sample is called Services, and these have a ton of code that you can go down and look at all the details of how these things would get set up. So if we click on the button, we're going to bring up that scene that we just had, and you notice we have here's that Press Me button that has the activity spinner. There's what an activity spinner looks like, and we have a little callback which is going to shut it off after 3 seconds. And here's our custom by class button. Notice we push it, it gets darker because we had that little splotch that was darker. And we're reacting to this one by throwing a little error dialog. I'm going to show you that. So let's go back to the code here. Look at the button assistant. In our setup function, we've set up various buttons, and we have right here we've written a routine called handle custom press, and we bind this so that we keep a reference to this call around. If we go up to the top, here's where handle custom press is, and when handle custom press gets called, when you press the button, you get we just throw an error dialog. It's the easiest possible thing to do. So whenever that press happens, the callback occurs. Why does callback occur? Because down here we've said to listen for it. Expand this back out. The event listen method allows us to kind of keep the application's ears perked up for various events that might happen. In this case, it's listening to button 2, which is our custom button, and it's listening for this event. Mojo event tap happens that the only event that a button can put out is Mojo event tap. When you look in the documentation, you will see when an event is listed, it's listed only by the last part of the word, or last part of the call. It's listed as tap, but it's always mojo.event.tap. And what this says is, keep an ear out for button 2, listen for this event called tap, and when you hear it, call this callback. And it's going to keep this hanging around. We've told it to keep it hanging around through the use of the bind, so it'll remember. And you saw the result. Press on it, and we get this nice error. And notice again that we have something where a lot of the work has been done for us. All we said was call the error alert with the word pressed on it. You get the error part, you get the dialog built for you, you get the OK button, which dismisses when you press OK. You don't have to do anything else. All that was done for you. Another reason to make use of built-in components. Let's play with the button CSS a little bit. I like that button, but it's too narrow. So let's change its width. Make its width, say, 100 pixels. Okay? Now we'll rerun it. Back to our emulator. Go to buttons. Aha! Nice and wide. Now, you might not like where it's sitting. Perhaps you want it to float instead of over to the left, where it's kind of sitting by default. Maybe we want to put it over to the right. So we'll say float right. And we'll start it up again. Aha, over to the right. So this is an example of doing some customization to the button. You could also select any kind of custom image you want. It'd be really nice if you have a custom image that's lighter and one that's darker, so that as you press down, it's really obvious that that's what you're up to. All right, let's talk about the list widget. List widget is this is the really big one. Almost all of the applications that you'll see for any sort of information management, our email application, the phone, the contacts application, they all use lists, and lists are extraordinarily powerful. You can have a very basic list which just has items in it, but you can also reorder things in a list. You can have all kinds of neat formatting in the list. And it's going to be the basis of basically any information-backed application that you write. So what are our list components? The basic list components are the div, which we have in the HTML element, and we have a container and a list item template. These are two pieces of HTML which act as a formatter for the list itself. The container is the formatter for the list, and the list item template is the formatter for the list item. And now we'll take a look at both of those. And then we'll take a look at some samples of this in action. This is how the list gets declared in your scene HTML. The div is simply a Xmojo element list. Given an ID, you're done. That's all there is to it. So in the HTML, it looks quite straightforward. The list container gets a little bit more complicated, and so we want to look at the couple of components here. We have a POM group, which encapsulates a title or a header, and the list elements themselves. And the POM group is just a way of keeping everything together. In this case, we have a list container.html file which the application knows about, and this is what's in that. So when we look for the list container, and you'll see that referenced in the code in a minute, that's what it's going to go look at. And you see that we have list title and list elements, which are going to be defined, in a bit. Here's our list item template, and this is a very basic list item template. This is another file, listitem.html we'll call it, and you'll see how that gets used later. And you see we have the class is POM row, and we have pound brackets dash word. We're going to populate an array with a bunch of data later that says word colon and then a string of some sort. That little hyphen there is for HTML escapement. So if you were to say, if you said Joe greater than Jim, then if you didn't escape it, then that greater than sign would come out as ampersand GT semicolon on escaped HTML. So if you put but if you put in the hyphen, then it will stay as the greater than sign that you want. This is pretty minimalist, and that's an okay thing. You might not need anything terribly complicated. And we want to instantiate the list. We do the same things we did before. We set up a model or attributes, and here's where we're going to set up what the templates are. So we wanted to have a list item template and a list container, a list template. The list template is that list container.html that we specified before. We don't have to say .html. It knows it's looking through the directory structure for, in this case, list. You'll find this example in the UI widgets code. And then it's going to look for list container.html, and now it knows what the list template is, and list item.html, and it knows what the item template is. And it's going to use that then when it wraps up the templates. And the item list is going to get populated elsewhere, and you will see that. Up here when we're talking about the list model, we give it a title, and we say the items are populated by this .items, and that's going to get dealt with later. And it's right here. Everybody know how to use JavaScript to push items into an array? That's exactly what we're doing right there. In this case, we have our object items, and it's an array, and we're pushing stuff into it. In this case, Word. In this case, scintillating, and we'll keep doing that until we get a nice little list of words, and say this list model.items equals items, and then model change, just like we had done before. Remember, with the button. And once you've done that, this list will populate. We're pushing the data into the array, and telling it that it's time to do something with all that data. Now, if we want to do something a little more complicated, and I'll show you this app on my phone in a second. We don't just want a simple list. Now we want to put an image in there, and we got a couple of elements, a couple of pieces of data that we want to assemble, and that's what this is showing. We still have this is still palm row, as you can see from the top. So this whole thing is now describing a row. But this time we're going to put a little table in here. This whole thing is going to be described as a table. There are other ways to do this. We can use CSS or any other thing. It's just as a quick and dirty way of throwing this together to show you all the stuff you can do. And so what I've set up is a section that's 75 pixels wide where an image is going to go. In this case, that source image is we're going to put a URL here, and so you can imagine that. It's just reading this as HTML. Image source equals some URL of an image at a height of 48 with cell padding of 2 pixels and center aligned. Simple, right? And then we're going to have another table data in the same row that is the title of our image, and then we're going to have a line break, BR there, and then put in some price data. And then that'll be the end of that row. And it's also the end of the table. Let's go back and take a look at some source for that and see how it works. I'm going to use Aries. Here's our application. This is a little minimalist application to do a quick search of eBay stuff. And I set this up in Aries to have a header, a little button to tell me to search, text field to pull the search items from, and I've dragged a list in here. Now, let's take a look at the aspects of the list that are important. First of all, the items. And what might you expect to find in there? In this case, nothing, because I'm going to populate it myself programmatically. I don't really want Aries populating for me, so I'm going to just have a blank object, or just like that. However, you might recognize this as our item HTML. So all the list items are going to get formatted just the way we said. This is just a reflection of what was on the slide. Now, if we look at our source for this, we'll come back to the other aspect of this in a little bit, because this is a service that's kind of interesting too. We're going to go out and we're going to get some data from the nice people at eBay, and we're going to populate our items list. Every time we cycle through an item in the list that we retrieve from eBay, we're going to push an item, title, an image, which is an image URL, price, and then some other data that isn't going to show up in the list, but I'm going to want access to later anyway. So I put it there so the list hangs onto it. And you can see how we handle the image. The image is right here. We just pull it out of the XML string that we got from EJ, or is from eBay, and we look for the gallery URL. No, we'll do a little try catch here if there doesn't happen to be a gallery URL, because not all listings have a picture in them. We're going to just ignore it and move on. So let's take a look at the debugger and hit run. Doing it on my device. Always goes to the device by default if one's plugged in. Try this again. Clear it. There we go. All right, so here we get some debugging messages coming out, and here's our little application. So we'll type in something that we want to buy, we want to look for. Hit search, and if we look through the debug information, you'll see it. You won't see it. You'll see it pulling debugging information for the info and the price and all that kind of stuff. And now we have this nice list, which is all rubber bandy and nicely. Oh, you haven't seen the whole thing, are you? Speeds up and slows down. Got a nice list. Now let's talk about menus. Mojo provides you with a couple of standard types of menus. First is the application menu or app menu, which is one you get when you tap on the icon or the application tab up in the upper left-hand corner of the screen. That's where you often find your edit, your preferences, help, things like that. So copy and paste would be under there. There's also a sub-menu which can be brought up through the press of a button of some sort. And then finally there's the command button. The command buttons are kind of interesting because they allow you to move back and forth between scenes. It's sometimes a convenient way of going back and forth between scenes if you don't want to use the swipe method. Well, we're going to look at app menus, and I'll let you check out the website for more information on the other types of menus. I did find a little navigation error which I fixed, which will go live tomorrow. So you'll have to bear with me on that. But let's talk about the app menus for a second. The way the app menus work, this is all built into the operating system, so that you don't have to do much in the way of, you don't have to do anything in the way of instantiation. What you do have to do is you have to populate the menu, and then you have to listen to and handle commands. We're going to look at the sample code in a second. And you'll see that there's a command handler, and this command handler is what allows you to intercept commands as they come off of the menu and do something with them. Let's go back to displays. Now we're going to go to a different sample application, which we're going to see when we get to services also, and it is. It's an accelerometer sample. This is kind of cool. The accelerometer is my favorite service that the phone has. And I'm going to go to the main assistant here and take a look at how we instantiate our menu. Here we are in the setup function, and we'll talk about the accelerometer stuff, the accelerometer specific stuff later. Right now, I want to talk about the menu itself. We're going to set up a model, just like we set up for all the widgets. We're going to set up a model for the menu, and it's going to comprise items that you'll see when the menu comes up. And what I want you to notice is that here we have a substructure. So there's going to be preferences, and then there's also going to be a subsection that's navigate to, and you'll see that there's a new array starting right here. Didn't indent that one properly. That'll make it easier to see. So our main menu has a list of items that starts with preferences and accounts, and the second item is navigate to. Then navigate to has its own set of items, so it has a submenu. This is actually lifted straight from our new Facebook application. So you might recognize news feeds and photos and all that stuff, although I chopped it off. And then when that array is, we've finished defining it, then we have one more item, which is help. Okay, so all we've done here is define the model for the menu. And now when we set up the widget, we set up a mojo.menu.app menu. Notice we're not doing a Mojo widget button at this point because this falls under the menu category. We tell it to omit default items. There's some default menu items which always show up, and often you don't want them, so you select true here and they'll go away. And you pass it the model, and now it knows what the list of menu items is going to be. Okay, so you set it up. Now what happens? Well, you notice in the model, we've given each menu item a label. Everybody know what that $L is for? Any clue? It's just a label, but the $L means is a signal to Mojo that it's going to be an internationalization component. So it may use that to swap out strings later on and put in strings in different languages. But there's this little command section, and that is an event which is going to get chucked out when something gets when the menu item gets hit. In this case, show preps alert. And you can probably decide that somewhere there's going to be a way of handling show preps alert. And sure enough, there is. And so we have a command handler here. In this case, just for ease of keeping it all in the same bit of code, I put it here in the scene assistant. However, it probably should go in your stage assistant if you're going to have more than one scene, because that way you don't have to keep writing it every time. You just write it in one spot and reference it later. And as you'll see in this one, I'm only handling the one command. So when the command gets thrown, and notice we did not have to write a handler, or we didn't have to write a listen for this. This is going to happen automatically. So all we have to do is handle commands. This is a very specific routine. And we get an event string, and then we look at event type, and we decide whether it's a command or not. And then we look at the command itself, and we start filtering. In this case, we do a case statement, and I've only looked for that one thing, the show preps alert. And if we get show preps alert, then we show an alert dialog and then break on out of here. So let's give that a look. Oh, it's going to look for no, it's going to look for a device. We'll just run this one on the emulator. Ordinarily, it doesn't do much good to run an accelerometer-based sample on the emulator, although it does handle some events, but if you want raw data, you need to do it on a device. So we'll launch this application now. And now you'll see we have this ACC sample tab here where we can get our menu, and we have our edit, our preferences and accounts, and look, we get our nice alert dialog, just like we asked for. Any questions on this so far? Looking okay? Understanding what's going on? Kind of? Okay. All right, I think that's enough for widgets right now. There's one more thing. And I just want to talk about the style sheets. I'm going to show you where to find the style sheets. In your installation, you have probably at your root directory somewhere, you have this directory called opt, and then POM SDK, share, reference code, framework, and this is what's running on your phone. This is not the low-level, Linux source or anything like this. This is all the JavaScript, all the CSS, all the HTML, all of the images are there, all of the resources are there, everything. If you want to look at what a style sheet looks like, so that you can get some idea of what styles you can override. You know, if you think there's more than what we list, and you want to go override something, well, go check it out. Globalbase.css, for example. So you can see all the CSS definitions are here. We'll take this one here, for example, body.pom.default. Set up as a background color that's not quite white. White is kind of hard on the eye, so we tone it down just a little bit. But say I want to, for the purposes of making this look a little bit better on a screen here, just so that I can, so that it'll be a little higher contrast. My little accelerometer sample, I did mess with the background. I made it all white. You could also change it to something else entirely. There we go. That's easy to read. Nice. So if you want to change the background color of your application, as an example, that's a way to do it. If you want to see all the widgets, for example, there they all are. All the JavaScript for date time picker, dialog, drawers, filter, everything. It's all right there. You can take a look at it. You can see what methods are public, what methods are private, and generally see the capability of everything that's going on. All the resources for everything that's on the device sitting right here in the images file. Okay, let's talk about the services. Services is the other direction. This is what provides you access to the operating system. It provides you access to the personal information database, personal information manager databases, system services, anything having to do with the cloud. Like we made an AJAX call before on that little eBay application, which I'll show you. Give you some examples of what we might get out of services. There's the accelerometer, as I said, my personal favorite. Alarms, anytime you want an alarm to fire, either to wake up your application, maybe say you want to wake up your application every hour and check something, that'd be an alarm service. GPS is a service. You can get location services. System sounds, even something like email or an application is also considered a service. Here's an example of doing something in system sounds. It's a question of doing a service request. This controller, not service request, this controller is, of course, a prototype construct. And you see it, there's a thing that looks very much like a URL, pom://com.pom.audio system sounds. It's not really a URL. It's just an identifier for the service. So don't think of it as it's going to a website somewhere. And in this case, we want to play a feedback sound, and we're going to look at DTMF2. That's just the touch tone tone for the number 2, and if we call that, you'll get that sound. And it's just a system sound that exists. Say you want to send an email. Here's an example of sending an email. Our service request is going to the application manager this time. We're not calling system sounds like we were last time. Now we're calling the application manager, and we're asking it to open up. And when we send parameters, we want to open the application called email. And this is the syntax for doing that. We send the method of open. We send a list of parameters, and then email has its own set of parameters, and that's what this area is here. We can set up a subject line under summary. We can the text is just whatever text that you want to be to start the email. Sometimes you might want that. You might have an application, for example, where you have a send support request button. Like you've had a problem and you want them to be able to just click a button and have it go straight to you. So you set up a subject line in something easily filterable like support for my app, and you set up some default text, which maybe you want to set up default text, say an error message, to say some error occurred. You could record that and stick it in the email, and then you would know when you got this email back exactly what happened, and you wouldn't be relying on a user saying, well, it kind of broke. You get some decent data in there. This role tells you whether the email, notice this recipient is an array, so you can have as many things here as you want. The role is just to CC or BCC. The value is your mail to address. You notice you set it up as a well-formed URL. And contact display is actually required. If you don't have this contact display, this won't show up. So make sure you do that. That's an example of email. Accelerometer. Now we'll get into a cool application. My, that's a lot. That's pretty dense. So let's take a closer look at what's going on here. First thing we do when we're working with an accelerometer, we can set up. We have a couple of options. We can set up whether we want the window orientation to be fixed which is by default, or free, meaning that you can orient the device and it will follow you. This is kind of an interesting one, set fast accelerometer. The normal accelerometer goes at 4 cycles per second. Fast accelerometer goes at 30. So if you really want if you're trying to do a game where you're tipping back and forth to do steering, say, then you probably want a fast accelerometer setup. So here's how we're going to set up. This is all taking place in our setup in our scene assistant. We have our handle orientation. We're going to create a function called handle orientation. And we're just going to set our reference to it here so we don't lose it. And we're going to listen for an orientation change. This is one of the things that you can listen for in an accelerometer. We're also going to listen for accelerations. Accelerations is the raw data that comes off of the accelerometer. It changes all the time. An orientation may come back and say, I'm upright now, I'm face down now, I'm on my side, but the acceleration is raw data. Okay? We do the bind. Here's an interesting subtlety. You may remember when we did the button, we said this.someroutine.bind this. And notice what we have here is bind as event listener. This is special. Bind as event listener makes sure that an event is passed, and the correct event is passed. So when you get the event in your handling routine, you want to take that event and do some data with it, but do some data manipulation with it. But that makes sure that the event really does get passed. And then we've now looked at we're keeping the ear out for orientation change and acceleration. And then here's what our response is going to be. We have, well, I'll show you the in the HTML we're going to have some text fields which we're going to throw the raw accelerometer data, and we're also going to take a look at what direction it's pointing. So we're going to get the event position, which is a number, and this just translates the number. It's just an array that translates the number for us into something that's useful to you. And we can also look at roll and pitch. No, we're not ready to wrap up yet. Now let's plug this in and take a look at the application as it exists on the device. Okay, here's our main scene in our accelerometer application. Notice we just have several text divs. That's all it is, and we give them a nice name. Also notice that I've given them some default text: 0, 0, 0, position, and 0 and 0. Why do you suppose I do that? It's just so I know I have a live. I know I have a live application. When the thing turns on, something's going to come up, and I don't have to worry about something. I don't have to worry about, did I do something dumb like not push the scene? I know the scene's pushed because those things come up. Now, in this case, they're instantly going to be overwritten by data, so it doesn't really matter. But if those come up and nothing else happens, then at least I know I've pushed the scene. If the scene was blank, if I left those blank, then I wouldn't necessarily know. We looked at the handle, at the command stuff here before, but now you can take a look at our handle acceleration and handle orientation calls. I guess I showed those to you before. I also want to point out this, which is when you set up a listener, if you don't clean it up, it's going to stick around, and that's bad for that's bad. That can lead to memory problems later on. This garbage collection will eventually come along and fix stuff for you, but you always want to do this in your cleanup. Just hit stop listing. So you see, these are basically duplicates of your listen call. And what I want you to get in the habit of doing is anytime you write Ojo event listen, do a copy and paste it down into the cleanup and change it to stop listening. Okay? If you do that, you'll always be fine. Yeah?
Does the Aries cleanup assistant automatically do that for you? Or?
Yes, I think it does.
Okay.
Yeah, because you don't have to set up the binds. That's already part of it. This is something you have to do only if you're working in Eclipse or the command line. Okay. Good question. The question was, does it do the cleanup for you if you're working in Aries? The answer is yes. Okay, let's take a look and see how this thing works. Okay, if we take a look, you can see note the current orientation, flat, face up, and we have pitch and roll values, and the X, Y, and Z is in G's, so you can get an idea of which direction the accelerometer is facing. The Z-axis is facing this way. Now, if we turn it, this is going to be, you're not going to see it this way, I guess, but let's see if I can get you a better angle here. Now you see the current orientation is pointed left, and our X is closer to 1 than it was before, so now we know which direction the X orientation is. And you can see we're getting a pretty decent update on the accelerometer data. So that's kind of an overview of services, widgets, all the good stuff. And that is the material I have for you today. Any questions I can answer?
When you open up the mail application, where you wrote that code,
yeah.
You said you passed it open.
Yes.
Is there other methods instead of opening? Can you just send a message to another app? Or that actually push it?
It's actually, that one is just going to open.
Okay.
You're just going to open it.
But can you? Is what I'm asking. Can you send?
Can I send a message just to another app? Yeah, the question is, can I send a message just to another app, or do I have to? Am I just going to open it? Most of the applications, like camera and email and the web, you're just going to open. Okay. That's all you're going to be able to do. There's some variations to that, but mostly it's just open. Because what you're going to do in that case is the email application is going to open up. It's going to open with a new email, new blank email. All that stuff is filled out for you, and all you have to do is hit send. Any other questions? So now you should be able to start working in earnest on the applications, I would think. If you have questions, shoot them to Connie. She'll pass them along, and we'll see to it that they get answered. By this time, you should have a pretty decent idea of what you can do and what maybe the design of your application is going to be. So hopefully next week we'll start seeing some examples. Any other questions? All right. Thank you very much for your attention. See you guys next week.
For more, please visit us at